Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do my February wrap up. I managed to read 9 books in February, which is pretty dang good for me, especially lately. Um, Unfortunately, there was only 2 real standouts for me. Everything else was either pretty bad or just But I'm going to dive right in by talking about the first book I read in the month, which was The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. Um, so this is a gothic mystery, and I had had it on my Kindle for a really long time. In fact, I had gotten an arc of it through NetGalley and completely forgot about it, unfortunately. But decided to finally pick it up, and I'm very glad I did because I absolutely freaking loved it. In a nutshell, this book is about a woman who, shortly after she gets married, her husband dies, and she's sort of shipped off to this very rundown estate that he owned, that he had only recently realized he had owned. And once she gets there, she finds this locked room, and she manages to get inside of it. And what she finds in there are these wood cuttings. There's these wood figures um, that were made question mark to look like real people, and they're extremely realistic looking, and she's creeped the fuck out by them, understandably. Still, she decides she's going to take some of them because there's many, many, many of these things in this room, and she decides she's going to take some of them and put them around the house, as you do, and that turns out to be a very, very bad idea. There are some genuinely creepy, creepy, creepy shenanigans going on in this book, and I love Laura Purcell's writing. So I gave this one 5 stars. Obviously, it was great, and I fully expect this to be on my list of favorite books of the year. The next book I read was The Hiding Place by C.J. Tudor. This was probably one of the most disappointing reads that I've had so far this year. I know it's only beginning of March, but still. I absolutely loved C.J. Tudor's first book, which is called The Chalk Man. I read it in a day. It had one of my favorite endings to a book that I've come across in quite a while. It is about a man who returns to his hometown to become a teacher at his old boarding school, and under very false pretenses. He also moves into a house that for the teacher that he's replacing, which was the site of a very disturbing murder-suicide in which the woman who was a teacher at the school kills herself and her son and leaves the message, "Not my son." And that's where the story is supposed to take off. Unfortunately, it never really gets going. I found it to be very boring and a lot of build up with not much payoff, and I was just very disappointed. I expected a lot more, and I gave it 2 stars. Next up, I read a book that's getting a lot of buzz, and I also got this one from the Book of the Month Club, and it is The Silent Patient, and the author's name is Alex, and I am not even going to attempt to try and say his last name because I will butcher it. So this book is about a woman who seemingly has a perfect life. She has a great husband who's famous. He's a photographer. She's an artist. And everything seems perfectly fine in their lives until the day that he comes home. She shoots him in the face 5 times and then never says another word. So she ends up in a mental institution, and this psychotherapist, whose name is Theo, decides he's going to make her his case study, and he's going to try and find out not only what happened and the reason behind everything that happened, but to try and get her to communicate again. This book was really interesting. It had an amazing premise, and I kind of went into it feeling a little bit skeptical because I tend, as some of you probably know, I tend to not like a lot of books that get a lot of buzz. But I have to say, I was actually very entertained by this book. It kept me reading, and I liked the story. The writing was not the best, kind of basic, sort of gave me the feel of almost a YA with some of the way especially the psychoanalyst, the monologues he was having in his head and sort of his behavior and just the way things were written. It just came off as kind of simplistic to me. But I did enjoy the twist at the end. I hadn't guessed what it was, and overall I enjoyed it. Anyway, I gave it a 3-star rating, and I was actually really impressed by the book overall. Next up, I read Mercury, which is one of the many, many biographies that have been floating around about Freddie Mercury. I decided to read it because, number one, I've been a lifelong Queen fan. Grew up listening to the music with my mom, and I had just seen Bohemian Rhapsody, which I absolutely freaking love. Love, 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 love. And was looking for a biography that I hadn't already read when I was younger. And I came across this one, and it was good. It wasn't perfect by any means. Again, the writing style was a little strange. The person that wrote it, was a journalist, and she kind of had, it didn't feel like a book. It felt like sort of a long article, especially towards the beginning. But it did have some things in there that I didn't know about him, and it was a very sort of even keel, unbiased sort of um, look into the life of one of my favorite musical idols. So I gave that book 3.5, I believe 3.5 stars. Next book I read was Early Riser by Jasper Fforde. This book I kind of have mixed feelings about. I have a soft spot for really strange, quirky books. Case in point being Space Opera by Catherynne Valente, which is the weirdest, craziest, most bonkers book I've ever read, and it's one of my favorites. This book is sort of sci-fi, I guess. It's the best description I can come up with. It is a alternate reality where humans hibernate during the winter, and all but I believe it's 0.1% of the population go into hibernation for the winter because of the severe weather conditions. And the people left behind are the ones that ensure the safety of the people who hibernate. And the main person in this book is a guy named Charlie, who this is his first season of being, I think they're called winter councils. And right from the very beginning of the hibernation period, there's this viral dream that's going around, and some people won't even admit that it's happening, but people in hibernation are starting to die. And it's sort of him investigating, him and his little misfit crew of people investigating what's going on. I loved the beginning of this book. I thought the writing was really charming, but the more we got into the story, the more it started to drag for me, until finally, I would say there was a chunk of about 150 pages which were just nothing really happened. It was kind of repetitive, just over and over and over again, and then things start to ramp up at the end of the book, which kind of saved it for me. But it was just way too long, and I at the beginning I thought it would be like a 4-star book for me, but by the end I think I ended up giving it 3 stars, just because the beginning was great, the ending was okay, but the whole middle section was just very disappointing. Next up, I decided to go in a completely different direction, and I read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I hope that's close to how you say her name. This is a YA book that is told in verse, and I haven't really been reading very much YA books lately, for the last few years actually, but I've been kind of putting my toe back into the YA river. And this is about a girl who's in high school who discovers that she has a talent for slam poetry. And it's a story about her family and her being in high school, and it's a very feminist, girl power kind of book, which I love. And I love that it was told in verse, and I love the characters, but I kind of didn't love it as much as other people did, and I hate when that happens, because it seems like everybody that I know in BookTube and on Goodreads just loved this book so much, and I don't think I got out of it what a lot of other people did. I still enjoyed it. It was a quick read. It kept me reading, but I only gave it a 3-star. Don't hate me. Next up, I finally finished a book that I've been working on probably since December, and it was Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Carey. I'm still terrible with author names, so that's why I always look confused when I'm saying who the books are by. Anyway, this was kind of an over-the-top space opera, which isn't technically what I normally read, but I really, really enjoyed this book. It was a lot of fun. It's basically a murder mystery in space, and it's the start of a long-running series. I believe there's like 8 or 9 books in it, and it's also the basis of a TV show, which I have not watched. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. It wasn't my problem with a lot of sci-fi is that a lot of it just, I'm going to be honest, a lot of it just goes over my head. But this was very easy for me to understand. It was fun. It wasn't too like serious. There was a lot of humor, and I really enjoyed the characters. And even though it took me a long time to read, I am definitely going to continue on with the series, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read what was my second favorite book of the month, and it was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. Basically, what this book is about is, in this world, mercenaries are like our rock stars, and they have bands of mercenaries who are like bands that travel and tour the world, and they're worshipped and looked up to like rock stars. And so this group of 4 extremely haggard, beat down, older mercenaries are inspired to get the band back together to rescue one of their members' daughters. I loved everything about this book. These characters are so amazing, and I can't wait to read the second book, which is called Bloody Rose. It does kind of makes me a little nervous because the second book features mostly new characters, and I love these characters so much. I was kind of hoping it would just be a continuation of their story, but I'm still excited to read it. And I gave this bad boy 4.5 stars. Yeah, it's about as close to perfect as you can get. It's fantastic, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it to people who even don't like sci-fi or fantasy necessarily. It's just a really good story with really great characters. Unfortunately, after reading Kings of the Wild, my reading month kind of took an unfortunate turn, because I then read, the very last thing that I read in the month was something that I really did not like, which kind of makes me sad because it was recommended to me by some people that I really admire, and it was a 200-page novella that is called Come Closer by Sarah Grahn. It is about a woman who seemingly has a very normal, average life. She's in a relationship, she's got a stable job, and then weird things start to happen. She starts noticing strange things, like her boss gets these emails and memos that are supposedly written by her. She has no memory of writing them, and when she's home, she hears like this incessant tapping noise that seems to be coming from the walls. And I just could not connect with the story at all. I didn't really particularly like the characters. I thought the resolution to the story was really sort of weak, and I just did not like this story at all. So unfortunately, this was my first 1-star review of 2019. As far as what I plan on reading in March, I don't really know. But I did start to reread 2 of my favorite series last night, and the first one being Illuminae, the first book in the Illuminae Files series, obviously, and I'm a little bit less than halfway through. Started it last night, and I'm enjoying it even more than I did the first time, and I freaking loved it the first time. So, and then also, I decided it was beyond time to do what is probably my fifth reread of Feed by Mira Grant, which is my all-time favorite adult series. I love this book. I love the series. And I just got it in my head that I wanted to revisit Georgia and Sean, so I started to read it. And as always, I'm loving it. I'm only about 50 pages in, but I don't care. I could probably recite half of this book by memory, but I don't care because I love it so much. Yeah, so there's my wrap up for February. That's about it. And yeah, thanks you guys. Thanks for watching, you guys. I hope you guys had a great February reading month, and I look forward to the books that I'm going to read next month. And I will talk with you later. Happy reading, you guys.